Hello everyone and welcome back. Today should be a pretty neat video, I think. We're going to install a transmission, Baker DD7, and I'm not going to talk a lot in this one. I've done several transmission install videos, kind of getting into the nitty-gritty and also rebuilding a transmission if you guys wanted to look back on that. So I've done that, so I'm not really going to talk in this one, but I didn't really go into detail showing someone how to set up that tapered main drive gear bearing, so you guys will get to see how I do that. Some of them I have to remove and reinstall that bearing, that main drive gear, several times to get that in play just right. You know, we're looking for 1/2 to 2 thousandths on that, and it needs to be precise. It's really no different than setting up a tapered main bearing on a crankshaft. So we're going to do that, and sometimes unfortunately I do find that I have to grind some shims to get that exactly where it needs to be, and a lot of it just has to do with manufacturing tolerances of the case and the bearing and the races and all that type of stuff. Hopefully we won't have to get into any of that. So the install, if you own an M8, you can still watch, because the installation process really is exactly the same for a cruise drive twin cam or M8. Now before we get to that, I want to cover a couple of quick things real quick. We're going to go over some tool stuff, and really, the fellow that sent me a box, I went to the post office, picked up a box, and opened it up, and it had awesome, cool tools in it. Now, this fella is a retired machinist. He was actually in aircraft engine component manufacturing, and he was involved in a calibration lab, test lab and stuff. So there's some really cool stuff in here that I want to show you guys. And then I want to make mention too, you know, a while back I did a video on shipping, and I think the title of it was "They Destroyed His Engine," and I talked about U-ship. And if you've got something like a, you know, transmission, big heavy box, or you're shipping an engine or even a motorcycle or anything else, I recommended using U-ship and gave a link. I'm going to put the link again down at the bottom in the description. And the reason why is I got an engine from a guy, another one, shipped by a common carrier, and the box was just completely destroyed. And so, but yet I've received another from a U-ship contractor, and it arrived in perfect condition. So if you guys are shipping anything, take a look at that, you know, because it's I feel bad for the fellas that have this stuff destroyed. But anyway, let's get on with it. So if you want to just see the transmission install, you can skip way ahead in the video. Otherwise, I'm going to roll the intro, and then we're going to go through a few tools real quick. Very generous of this fella to send me this stuff, a nice little gift box. So I want to show it off. It's pretty cool stuff. Let's get going. It's really neat to get something like this, because you know, some of these gauges and indicators, I'm going to go through everything here, they've got age on them, but they still work flawlessly, and you can see that this man took incredible care of his tools, and I feel so lucky to have them and be able to use them now that he's retired. So I'll start with, this is a 1 thou 1-inch travel indicator from Federal. A cool thing about this thing is, you know, most dial indicators, it moves up and down here at the top. Your quill does. Well, this one, you can actually grab it up here and then run straight across surfaces instead of having to use the mounting point on the back. So you can grab it from the top, and it actually makes it easy to either kind of quick measurement by putting it in a chuck, or, you know, putting it in an end mill holder, or you know, anything like that. So it's cool. Nice little piece there. The next one is a stare-it indicator. I think you can see that. Look at that. 1/2 tenth, right? A 1/2 tenth indicator. So for those that aren't exactly sure, that's a decimal point with 4 zeros and then a 5 at the end. So a 1/2 tenth indicator. Very cool. And this is a 10th indicator. You could call this a dial test indicator. Same sort of thing. You can grab it up here and on the back, and it's very small, also from Federal. Really, really cool piece. All right, the next one is another micro dial test indicator. This one also measuring to 1/10, and also from Federal. I'll get a lot of use out of this stuff, no doubt. And then next we get into some Brown & Sharp stuff, and this is another type of dial test indicator, also measuring to a 1/10. Really nice piece. And I don't, this one almost looks like it's never been used. I don't even see any greasy fingerprints on it yet. And then this one has not been used at all. It's still in the plastic. And it's a Brown and Sharp, and this one is also a 1/2 of a 1/10. Again, 0.0005 right there to a 1/2 a 1/10. And he's brand new in the box. Quite a piece. Then we have a contact point set with some rollers and stuff. This will be incredibly useful. Thank you very much. And then a scale loop with magnifying glass. And when you look in this thing real close, I know you guys, well, you might be able to see some of the numbers down there. I don't know if you can see them. But anyway, when it's got a scale on the inside, and that scale is 5 thou basically. So 5 thousandths, you can look and measure things using the scale on the inside. Still has its original carrying case. Quite a thing. Alright, next. A classic Starrett mag base. Very cool. Alright. And then we get into a Mitutoyo digital micrometer. Get you a little better look on that. Very sweet. Another dial test indicator, and this one measures to the 1/10. Check this out. Still in, I'll make sure it's in there, in its original box. Imagine the use, the thing he's measured out of with this thing, and with all the tips, everything else in it. Very cool stuff. And let's see, what else do I have? Oh yeah. And a set of like tap microfiles. Well, you can use these for various different things. They can be taps, microfiles, that sort of thing. Very cool piece. That's a item from Morris. So again, he asked me not to mention his name, and that's a very humble thing to do, and very nice person. But I at least wanted to say thanks. I'm going to get tremendous use out of this stuff, measuring very, very small things. So if you made it this far, thanks for watching. I think it's time for us to put in a transmission. You know, I said through this video that I wasn't going to talk, but for the most part I'm not. And I'm sure we'll run into a few things here and there that I want to mention. I've already seen something on the other side. You know, I can't do a video without talking a little bit at least. One of the things I want to point out before I put this adapter in is you should be able to see it on the video, this strange pattern that's here inside the bearing bore here. I had mentioned in a post that I was doing a bearing and it basically just fell out in my hands. And so what you're seeing here, this pattern, the bearing had actually started spinning inside the case, and he didn't know it, but he was on the path of destruction. This should have some sort of resistance to it, and if you happen to have a case that's not too bad, it's still, you know, slip in, no shake, but it doesn't quite have the interference fit it should. You still don't want it to shake, of course. You could use green Loctite on this, put it in there, and this can actually save a case as long as it's not worn out too bad. Of course, you want to make sure everything's spotlessly clean. In some cases, if it's way too tight, you might have to heat the outside of the case. I don't think I'm going to have to do that. Simply because it's, you know, it's worn a little bit. And this is the adapter that comes with the transmission. Yeah, this one's sliding in nicely. I don't think we'll have any issues. Yeah, you don't need to heat it, but it's still a tight enough fit that it's not going to go anywhere. Notice, of course, using Jim's tools. Do a nice little plug for Jim's because they make great tools. And I'll put a link of this main drive gear installer and remover kit that they have, so that you guys know it. And then there'll be a link to it, and then of course to the website. And you'll know it should bottom out rather firmly, and you'll know because the clip that goes in here will fit tightly up against that. If you have a difficult time getting the clip in, then you know you don't have this in there far enough. So I can tell got that in there all the way. You want to be sure when you put the clip in, the bevel side, there's a bevel and there's a flat side. Make sure the bevel side is facing out. I always like to give it just a light tap. Make sure it's in there, wedged in there all the way. Now this is the main drive gear that just slides off the transmission. And you'll notice there's already one of the spacers installed on here, the blue one. And in Baker's instructions, they tell you the majority of the time, I believe the spacer measures at 106 thousandths, I think. But they say that this one, the majority of the time, will work. In all honesty, I haven't found that to be true. It seems to be more prominent on the M8s that you have to change this and measure it 2 or 3 times. More commonly, yes, it works on twin cams, but the M8s, it's very rare that it does. I'd like to do the initial install with the bearings dry, no assembly lube on them, because assembly lube does take up space. And when you're measuring a 1/2 to 2 thou, and you pile assembly lube in here, you'll get a false measurement. So we're going to install them with just a slight amount of very lightweight oil on them. Just to prevent any kind of galling, but other than that, don't use any assembly lube. Right, with this assembled like that, a little bit of oil here. This sliding this spacer on really isn't a necessary step. I do it just so I don't have to thread this bolt on there quite as far. Slide in here with our wrench, back side of the bolt. Now, one of the things I want to point out, you have to remember, a lot of tools are intended for installing stock parts, right? So these cups aren't necessarily deep enough to allow for the main drive gear to go far enough inside to squeeze the bearing together. So I'll show you how you can remedy that situation. Now, these are all the shims that come with it to set the end plate for these bearings, but it's also great to work as spacers that you can slide over that and then reinstall your press tool, and that'll give you the extra distance you need to finish pressing it in there. I can tell already. As I said, you know, they tell you that most of the time that shim is enough, and in reality it's not most of the time. This one's probably got 10 20 thousandths play in it. But I'm gonna run this through one more time to make sure that my cup isn't bottoming out, because it could be that your cup is bottoming out when you're tightening it down, and maybe we're not flat against the washer, the spacer that's in there. So I just want to double check and make sure, and see if I look at the depth, for example, this being bottomed out, I can see the edge is right here. Well, that's nowhere near the thickness of the inside of the tool. So in fact, I am not bottoming out. Okay, this is, don't take this measurement lightly, guys. A tapered bearing needs to be adjusted proper. This is just because it's a transmission and Baker's instructions tell you most of the time that spacer works. Well, I'd mentioned in the beginning of it that most often in a twin cam, it's pretty close. This is nowhere near close. We're probably at 10 to 15 thou, and it's only supposed to be half to 2. Don't take this lightly. I'm going to show you how I do it. Notice I've got a very thick steel plate here that I've bolted to the transmission, and I'm going to use my mag base with a 1/2 thousandths indicator to measure this, and then I'm going to show you what most often how I see others measuring this. Trying to position it to where you might be able to see the indicator on the camera. There we go. And again, we're looking for 1/2 to 2. And yeah, geez, I've got 10 there. Let's see. Let's get it real close. Yeah, if I wiggle a bit, I've actually got 11 thousandths. So, I mean, that's quite honestly 10 times what it should be, right? So I'll show you how I've seen some people do it. They'll skip the step of that plate and they'll click it onto their frame. And mag bases can be pretty strong, actually. Let me get into the curved portion here so it'll hold itself. There we go. A good mag base is pretty strong. You can see it supports its own weight. But I want to show you something interesting. Let's say you and I hope you can see the indicator from there. It'll certainly support its own weight, and I think this may surprise you. And here I get about 12 or 13 when I measure it here. All right? Yeah, about 12 or 13. Back and forth, taking it real easy. But watch what happens if I just barely put pressure on the frame. That's how much flex is in the frame, and I'm barely just single finger. Even with my pinky, I can show I'm zeroed there. That's 4 thousandths right there. So if you've got this and you're pulling back and forth, even lightly, you can still see that variance of 3 to 4 thousandths just by moving the frame. So you want to make sure you do this. And now we have to take it back apart again and change out that spacer. Let me get one more very accurate measurement, and then I'll actually measure the spacers. They did give you the instructions, the thickness, but we're going to measure them anyway. I've got exactly 10 thousandths. Alright, now let's pull this main drive gear back out. Sorry I missed, this is, now we can pull our main drive gear back out. I'm not showing putting the tool in on the other side. If you guys took your transmission apart, you'll already know how those tools work. So, no need to show it in the video here. But anyway, the way we do this, very carefully, you can reach up. Try not to stretch this seal too much, and it can be reused as long as you're careful with it. Now we can remove this spacer and we'll measure it up. So this one we are at the advertised 106, 105 and a half to 106, working our way around. Yeah, 106, even thinner. Thinner. Man, this stinks. Wow. Nope, not even close. Nope. Nope. And nope. Well, that's disappointing. There is one other factor that I want to point out that I didn't forget about. If you guys remember, I showed you that little area inside the transmission case there where the bearing had started spinning. It's quite possible that that bearing spinning removed, clearanced, if you will, and somehow allowed bearing the clearance to change inside there, the flange on the inside of the case. Maybe it's a little bit thinner than what it's supposed to be. And that could be a contributing factor as well. But, you know, in any event, if you guys are looking at this main bearing conversion as absolutely being a way to save your case, that if that bearing does come loose in there, it may not always be a solution. And you may have to take these additional steps in order for that to work, and you still get the proper clearance that's in there. So that's all I got to say about that. I hate when crap like that happens. You know, sometimes I've talked to several of you guys. I talk about I've mentioned that I've done transmissions before, and sometimes I have to grind these spacers, and that's exactly what just happened. And to some degree, I'm glad it happened for informational purposes, but now what it means is I have to take stock that I have for this very purpose, because I do run into it a lot, and I'll take that stock, put it on the precision grinder, and have to grind my own spacer for that to get it where it needs to be. This is the difference between doing precision work and not. And the fact is, you know, it doesn't sound like that much. However, that could very well be just enough to crash a gear, to prematurely wear the bearing, the races, and all those other things. Now, I had mentioned that it's actually rare that I see that the pre-installed spacer works. So for you guys that are just putting this in and not taking the measurement or taking it off the frame or whatever, you're doing yourself a major, major injustice. This is a thing that just needs to be right. And so unfortunately, I'll add, you know, another hour or so of time into getting just that right. And may have to do it once or twice more to just get it exactly where it needs to be, but it's a necessary step to make sure that it's done correctly. And I hate to say bring this video to an abrupt end and not finish the transmission, but there's no need to see me machine a spacer, and so we're going to go back and probably tomorrow, looking at the time give or take, and complete the transmission, so there will be a part 2 to this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I said I wasn't going to talk very much, but I still talked a little bit, and regardless, we'll get the transmission buttoned up and we'll move on to the next one. Guys, thanks a million. Thank you very much, and thanks again to my friend for sending the gifts that he sent. Fills my heart. It was a very nice thing to do. Take care of yourselves and each other. Y'all have a good one.